Hello everyone. This is Dr. Govind Saraswat, Assistant Professor in English from Government College, Deghana. Dear students, today we are going to discuss New Classical Period. It is an important literary period and we will talk about what do we mean by neoclassicism, then how can we uh, look at this period, and then what are the main features of this age. First of all, let's discuss the definition of neoclassicism. First of all, it is mandatory to know about the etymology of the word neoclassicism. The term neoclassicism is a combination of two words, neo and classic. The word neo has been derived from a Greek word neos, which means young or new, while the word classic refers to the style and works of the ancient authors of Greece and Rome. To combine these two words, we get the meaning of neoclassicism as the rebirth and restoration of classicism. So, neoclassicism is the movement in the history of English literature which laid immense emphasis on revival of the classical spirit during the period between 1660 to 1789 or 1798. That is the time period of this neoclassical age. The writers of this period immensely endeavored to follow the ways of the writers of the period of Augustus, Emperor of Rome, who produced unparalleled which produced unparalleled writers as Horace, Virgil, and Ovid. So the writers or the leading writers of this age, they sought guidance in the works of ancient Greece and Roman writers, and they tried to follow the those writers of the antiquity in letter and spirit in this neoclassical age. Now, we can see or we can understand this neoclassical period into three different stages. First of all, there is the Restoration period. It is from 1660 to 1700. Then the Augustan age. It spans from 1700 to 1745. And at the last, there is the age of Johnson. It ranges from 1745 to either 1789 or 1798. The Restoration period is uh, from 1660 to 1700. The King Charles II, he was restored to the throne of England. That is why uh, it is known as Restoration, because monarchy was restored. He killed Oliver Cromwell, and with his coronation, there started a new age which is known as Restoration Age. The leading authors of this age are Dryden, Milton. They used sublime, grand, and impressive style, scholarly allusions, and mythology, and they curb the intense use of imagination. The literature of this restoration period is full of pomp and show, and restoration comedy is very famous of this literary age, in which The characters, they are foppish dandies, and they hail from high class society. They are such characters who know the price of everything, but they know the value of nothing. They are always indulged in the cynicism of other people, and then uh, indulge in intrigues also. The main thing is they exhibit false manners. They have nothing inside them. They are not true. It is just the appearance which is more valued than the real character in the Restoration literature. Then comes the Augustan age. Why does this second stage is known as Augustan age? There is a reason. The term Augustan was first applied to the literature of the 18th century as a term of high praise. The 18th century is called or known with this name because those who use this term they believe that as the age of Emperor Augustus was the golden age in Latin literature in the Roman Empire, so the 18th century was the golden age in literature in England. This word is used to draw an analogy between English literature of the first half of the 18th century and the Latin literature of the times of Virgil and Horace. Then, then this Augustan age is also known as Age of Reason, Age of Pope. Then we have very famous authors like Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison, Richard Steele. They are very famous authors of this second phase of New Classical period. Then at the end there is Age of Johnson. The Age of Johnson lasted up to 1798. The period of Augustan age is from 1700 to 1745, and age of Johnson is from 1745 to either 1789 or 98, 1798, because in 1789 French Revolution started. So some people take this historical event to be the beginning point of Romantic age, while some other believe that with the publication of lyrical ballads in 1798, the Romantic age started. So the age of Johnson that lasted either up to 1789 or 98, and the Romantic movement was underway with the publication of uh, Wordsworth, Wordsworth's lyrical ballads. So these are the three stages of New Classical age. Then let's discuss some of the major characteristics of this New Classical literature of this New Classical age or period. First of all, there is predominance of logic and reason. The age preceding the classic age was the Restoration age. The Restoration age was notoriously known for its moral depravity, outrageous licentiousness, scandalous profligacy, and corruption. It was also an age of uncontrolled passion, irrational sentimentalism. In the age of Pope, there was a general disapproval of and reaction against all these irrationality and indecencies. The people were fast growing sick of the outrageous license and profligacy. There was resolute attempt in the direction of moral regeneration and control of passion. Thus, while revolting in this way against restoration profligacy, the men of this age were equally hostile to everything that savored of Puritan fanatism and religious zeal. Good sense became the idol of the time, and good sense meant love of the reasonable and the useful, and hatred of the extravagant, the mystical, and the visionary. This led to the supremacy of logic and reason. So, the literature of this new classical age that is devoid of and uh, imagination and it is based on logic and reason. Now there is no supremacy of emotions, rather the literature became intellectual. All the preachers appealed to the reason and good sense of the people. All the theological writings of the 18th century were characterized by this rationalistic and utilitarian temper. Then there is the second feature is lack of passion and emotion in literature. The same temper of suppression of passion and emotion and supremacy of reason, logic, and good sense prevailed in the literature of this age. It was a literature of intelligence, of wit, and of fancy, not a literature of emotion, passion, or creative genius. Spontaneity and simplicity are sacrificed to the dominant mania for elegance and correctness. More emphasis was laid on the form than on the spirit. Then the third feature is uh, the new classical literature is the literature of town life. In their search for decency, good sense, elegance, and mannerism, the literary men confined themselves to town life. They found rural life and even nature outside the limits of their sense of decency and good sense. Even their poetry seldom traveled beyond the interest of that narrow world of the town. Their outlook was circumscribed to coffee houses and drawing rooms. The poets drew their sustenance from politics and discussion of the day. Nature was no proper subject for their poetry. The language of their poetry was equally stilted, artificial, and mannered. The humbler aspects of life were neglected in their poetry, and it showed no real love of nature, landscape, or country things and people. Then the next feature is the literature of new classical age is satirical and didactic also. The poetry of this age, as we have said above, was in the main the product of intelligence playing upon the surface of life. It was lacking in emotion and imagination. It was commonly satirical and didactic. The works by Dryden, like McFlurnoy, it is a satire upon in a poetaster of this age, Richard Shadwell. Then it is the literature of this age is didactic also, a poetry of argument and criticism of politics and personalities. The satires were social, political, and even personal, as I have already told you that McFlurnoy is a personal satire in which he satirizes and he makes us laugh with all his remarks that he has set against this poetaster, Richard Shadwell. Then the use of closed heroic couplets. The neoclassical poetry of the early 18th century was almost entirely written in the closed heroic couplets. The poets of the Elizabethan age and even of the Restoration age wrote their poetry in many types of stanza forms, using different types of meters. Many eminent poets of the rank of Shakespeare and Milton, they wrote much of their poetry even in blank verse. But the new classical poets wrote their poetry only in the closed heroic couplets. There is a reason. The closed heroic couplet best suited their poetic expression on account of its epigrammatic terseness and satirical suitability. The couplet was equally suitable for stereotyped traditional poetic diction. Then, at the uh, in the later half of the 18th century, there is a gradual change that can be seen in the literature of this period. 18th century was divided into three parts. Then, in the later half of the 18th century, the age of Johnson, from there has started a new vein. Some poets they felt that the artificial diction and the use of uh, sophisticated language that has made literature only uh, a, a tool or something that is addressed to the town people, and it has restricted the literature inside the coffee houses. Okay, that kind of culture that was prevalent at that time. So the men of letters of neoclassical age, they felt that the poet is a gifted person, and he should follow the rules of classical writers and the way they have written as it is. Alexander Pope, he was very much concerned in this regard, and in his essay in essay on criticism, he has advised the poets to imitate uh, Horace and Virgil and Homer also. As he has said in Essay on Criticism, be Homer's work your study and delight, read them by day and meditate by night. So, this is what was going on in the new classical age, and the content and as well as the subject matter that was really artificial, and it made literature uh, uh, away. It made literature to be uh, not to be. It made literature away from the reach of the common people, and it was centered within the town life and coffee houses and the so-called cultured and high-class people. But at the end of this century, there there can be seen a gradual change. The English social life underwent a slow but steady change in social, political, religious, and literary values between these stages. The new generation of the age of Johnson, they started reacting against the sterility and slavishness and suppression of the genius in the age of Pope. The people of the age of Johnson, they found their formalism, their narrowness of sympathy, and their controlling ideals weary of the long continued artificiality. They began to crave for something more natural and spontaneous in thought and language. So they awoke to a sense that in a world of wonder and mystery, there were many things underwent undreamt of in the shallow philosophy of the Augustinus school. So, with these feelings, there grew a widening and deepening sympathy with man as man, irrespective of his position in society. This spirit was further strengthened by the growing concept of democracy. People became increasingly familiar with the notions of liberty, equality, and rights of men. Rousseau's concept that men are born free and equal got hold of the public at large. This change in human outlook had its effect on the literature of this time. The literature of the age of Johnson was essentially different in respect alike of matter, spirit, and form. Then, who were the writers who started writing against the prevalent trend of neoclassical age? There were some pre-romantic poets like James Thomson, Thomas Gray, William Collins, William Black, William Cooper, James Macpherson. So these are the writers or poets who started writing uh, such poems who have nature as their subject matter. Then they also write about emotions, like the graveyard school of poetry, in which we have Thomas Gray, Robert Blair, they are like poets. Then James Thompson also, he also wrote some elegies. So elegies are full of emotions. They can be personal or they can be universal in tone. But even then, we can see that these elegies are full of pure emotions, which was lacking in the artificial literature of the neoclassical age. Then the description of nature, James Thompson's famous collection of poems, The Seasons, that has started a new wave in the English poetry. None before him made nature as the main subject matter of poetry. He has used nature in the forefront, not in the background. Then uh, William Collins, Ode to Evening, Ode to Simplicity. Then the poets, they started writing about abstract things. So the logic, the reason, the intellect, these all things were replaced with emotion, abstract ideas, imagination. So the uh, genius or the creativity of the poets, they again started writing spontaneously, uh, feeling inspired with full of pure emotions. Okay, so the pre-romantics are different. Okay, so they started a new wave of uh, poetry or literature at the end of this new classical age. The major poets or major authors of this whole neoclassical era, they we can cite John Milton, John Dryden, Will- William Congreve, then Cavalier poets also, metaphysical poets are also there, and Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, Collis Burr, and then we have Dr. Samuel Johnson, and the four wheels of the van of Noble, Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding, Lawrence Sterne, and Tobias Smollett. Then at the we have Oliver Goldsmith also. Oliver Goldsmith and Richard Sheridan. They were the dramatists and poets also. Oliver Goldsmith is famous for his She Stoops to Conquer, The Citizen of the World, his collection of essays, then for his sentimental comedies, and Richard Sheridan for his Rivals and School for Scandals. It is again a restoration comedy uh, in which the false manners are uh, taken to be more important than the real emotions and real values of our life. So this is all about neoclassical age. Thank you for listening me carefully, and I hope that you will use all this information and you will add something of your own and will you will try to develop a more clear and comprehensive uh, concept or outlook regarding this neoclassical age. Thank you.